Hi everyone, and welcome to our install video for the 3rd Gen Tundra Low Pro front bumper. We're going to get started by just showing you what comes with the kit. First off, you're going to have the bumper mounting brackets. You'll get a couple of smaller L brackets that help support the plastic bumper once this is installed. You'll get the hardware kit to install everything, and then these brackets here are for the lower air dam, the little fold down air dam on the bottom. Now this truck here we're working on today is not equipped with that, so we didn't paint those brackets because we will not be installing them, but we will show you how to install and relocate that motor using a clip from one of our other install videos. Just one thing to note, you do want to make sure that you paint or powder coat everything before you install it, because our products do ship bare steel, so you want to make sure you get those coated first. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We'll show you guys how to start taking apart the truck so we can get this put on. So first thing we're going to start with is taking out some screws from the fender flares and then along the bottom of the bumper here. So there's 5 right in this area. We're going to start with this top one here. And these you can use a 10mm socket or wrench. You can go ahead and remove all of those screws on both sides. Then we're going to go underneath here and take a few more out. Next, along the bottom of the bumper here, we have 8 more screws all across here that are going to use a 10mm as well. Next thing we're going to do is pull back this inner fender liner a little bit, and then we need to pop the fender flare loose. So we're going to go ahead and kind of get this felt stuff out from behind the plastic there. Kind of push it behind the tire so it stays out of the way. And then we can take the fender flare. We need to disconnect it from the bumper here. So there's like a flat tab that pushes through inside the bumper, and you have to push on the little tab that's a part of it and then pull out on the flare at the same time. We'll show you what that looks like as soon as we get it out here. Then there's just a couple of round plastic pop clips up here. So you just pull on the flare a little bit and it'll pop loose from the fender. But these ones back here on the flare, you basically just have to push this little flat piece in as you're pulling out on the flare, and it'll release from the bumper. So you can go ahead and do that on the other side as well. All right, now we're up in the engine bay here, and we have 4 screws to remove to get this upper grill portion to come loose. Those are going to be a 10mm also. Then next we have 2 little plastic clips right down here by these wiring connectors. Just have to get a screwdriver under one of those openings, pop the top up and pull that clip out. And then you'll also want to disconnect these 2. We already had them loose here. These 2 electrical connectors, you'll undo those to disconnect them from the grill. And then same thing on this side. Plastic clip. Pull that out and then disconnect these 2 wires as well. So we're about ready to pull the whole front end off the truck here. Just one little spot to note here. You have to peel the plastic bumper out and around that piece in order to get it to come loose properly. So you want to do that on both sides, and then you'll kind of reach up behind here and push out on the plastic so it'll unclip from the fender, and then it will also unclip from the headlight. So you want to do that on both sides here, and then we'll be ready to take the front off. Usually have to give it a pretty good wiggle and a solid pull to get the middle to disconnect. There's this big support bracket here. The bumper clips into these, so you kind of have to wiggle it and pull pretty hard to get it loose. We're just going to put it face down on a blanket here for now. So next up, we're going to take off this aluminum crash bar here. So there's 8 bolts total to get that off. It's these 2 on top, and there's 2 on the bottom here on each side. Those are going to be a 17mm socket. This piece we will not be reusing. All right, we have our whole front end up on a cart here, so we can show you guys how to disassemble a couple things from the inside so that we can get this center black plastic cover out of the way. So we're going to start with, there's these kind of like chrome trim pieces that go up the center on the front of the bumper here. We need to get those out of the way. So there's 3 screws on each side. Currently we're on the driver's side, bottom of the bumper, working right here. So we're going to take 3 of these screws out, just using a Phillips screwdriver on our drill there. We're going to take those 3 loose, and then we have to just disconnect these little plastic clips. You want to be careful with these because if you bend them too far, they will snap off, and then that chrome trim's not going to stay clipped back in there. So we want to pull those back all the way around where you see this little plastic pin sticking through. So there's 2 down here, and then 2 on the side here. And then we're going to kind of lift up the bumper and pull this piece out. Now it kind of has to, 2 of those screws we took out loosen this upper portion, and this just has to pull out from underneath it. So we want to take that piece off on both sides here. All right, next we need to get this big lower black plastic cover loosened up, and so we can take that off. So this just has a whole bunch more of these little pull-out style plastic pins here. You just kind of fold them to the side. So there's a whole bunch of them. We want to work our way across, loosening those, because a couple of these are for this upper piece that we need to loosen also. Just want to go all the way across the inside, getting those loosened up. And then we have some big ones down on the bottom here, so that needs to be pushed in. It's kind of the tricky part about getting this thing out now, is that you have to hold up the bumper cover while you're trying to release this lower piece without letting them all clip back in. Looks like most of these are already broken, so they're just kind of folding back the opposite direction. That's fine because we're not reusing any of that. We'll be cutting this lower piece out. So this piece, we will not be reusing anything from this. So we flipped the bumper cover over now, and we're back on the front. We need to get this wiring harness out of the way so we can kind of move it back for when we're cutting the plastic. So we need to come through and unclip all of these little pins, so there's just a push in on each side while you're pulling the wiring harness down. So you just want to work your way across and get all of those out. So now that our wiring harness is all unclipped from the bumper, you just want to make sure that this is tucked out of the way so we don't cut through any of the wires. We're going to be cutting this lower plastic piece out, so you want to make sure that, of course, when you're using your cutting tool, you don't cut through any of these wires. If you want to, you could unplug the park sensor connection here and just fold it back under there a little farther, or kind of zip tie it out of the way for now. Just make sure that that's clear and you're not going to cut into it at all. Once we get started cutting here, we're basically going to go right inside this little groove here at the bottom of the park sensor area and right across the bottom below this little plastic cover, and then around this groove right here, just to this side of that groove. Because if we cut right on the groove here, there will be a little bit of plastic sticking out from under this cover, and we don't want that. So we're going to come down along here about a 1/4 inch over from that groove. So I'm going to get my grinder and cutoff wheel and everything ready, and we'll go ahead and show you guys how to cut that. All right, so I'm about to get ready to cut here. I'm using just a grinder with a cutoff wheel. Of course, there's various ways you could do it. The cutoff wheel does make this plastic pretty hot, kind of melts it. So that's why I always throw on a welding jacket or something, because it'll throw hot plastic everywhere. But I'm going to go ahead and get started cutting here. I'm going to cut right next to this groove here on both sides, and then work my way across the top center there. So I switched over to a sanding disc on the grinder so I can clean up a bunch of these edges here. So this is pretty rough cut, of course, just getting in there with the cutoff wheel. So I'm going to sand into this corner a little bit and all down the side here to get rid of these sharp pieces and smooth it all out and make it nice and even. Up here we have these little points from where the plastic used to clip in there. I'm going to sand those down so they're nice and flat, and then just even this out along the bottom here and just work my way around cleaning everything up. We'll show you exactly what it looks like after we're done here. So I've got all of my plastic cleanup done here. Got rid of all the rough edges and the kind of the jagged cuts. So we're all cleaned up on the edge here. I sanded this corner in a little bit farther because I couldn't get in there with the cutoff wheel. And then just for reference, along the top here, you can see that's right on the edge of the hole where the wiring harness used to clip in. So we basically sanded right up to where that hole is gone and flush all the way along the bottom here. So that's a pretty good reference point for how far up to cut that. So now that that's done, we're ready to go ahead and reinstall these little chrome trim pieces, and then we'll move on to getting the Low Pro on the truck. All right, we're back working on the truck here, and we need to take off this grill support bracket here just so it's out of our way while we're working on getting the Low Pro installed. So this is a 10mm socket here. And we do need to put this piece back on, so just kind of set that aside and we'll reuse it later. Okay, so we're getting ready to install our bumper mounting brackets onto the truck here. So we have 2 of these brackets, driver's side and passenger. So these need to be oriented with this flat plate gusset brace on the bottom, and then this large ovalized hole on the top here, and this flat plate to the inside of the frame. That's where the bumper is going to mount. So we're going to hang this large hole here right over the stud that's on the frame, and then we're going to use the factory bolts, these metric M12 bolts that we took out of the aluminum crash bar, 1/2-inch flat washers to put on the bolt, and we're just going to thread these right into the bottom nuts that are in the front of the frame here. Those will thread right into that spot. Then for the top 2 holes, we're going to use another one of those metric bolts with a flat washer, and then a 1/2-inch flat washer on the back side. And then we're going to use the metric nuts that were provided with the hardware kit to go on these bolts. Now we don't want to tighten any of that hardware yet. You can basically just get it close, but you still want to have it loose enough so that this bracket can slide side to side on the frame. Even there, I just barely tightened it and it wouldn't really move. You want it to be able to easily move like that, so that when we get the bumper put in place and we tighten these, the brackets can slide into the bumper and adjust right where they need to be. So you can go ahead and get both sides put on and ready for the bumper. All right, so we're getting ready to put the bumper onto the truck now. So if you have any fog lights that you want to put into the bumper, you'd want to do that now. So we have a pair of the Baja Designs S2s. We mounted the brackets on there, and you also, since these mounting brackets are on the top of the light rather than the bottom like most are, you'll need to flip over your light bezel so that the text isn't upside down and the logo isn't upside down. So you can go ahead and put those into the bumper. Like I said, those go into the mount above the light. We'll just push those up in there. So there is a little bit of left to right adjustment depending on how you might want to turn that light. Just so you know, there is some adjustment there, and you can adjust that either now or after the bumper is on the truck. You can still get a wrench in here to adjust and turn your light if you'd like to do that later. So we're ready to put the Low Pro on the truck here. So Landon's going to bring it around and hold it up into place, and then we're going to use the grade 8 1/2-inch carriage bolts, grade 8 flat washers, and lock washers, and grade 8 nuts to hold it on. We're going to put the bolt in from the outside, flat washer, lock washer, and then the 1/2-inch nut. So we got our Low Pro bumper put up in position here. We used a floor jack to hold the bumper up in place while we snugged down some of this hardware. So we got 3 of our 1/2-inch bolts in place here, the carriage bolts, and we actually left 1 out on each side so that we can see the center of the hole. The bumper adjusts front to back and up and down, so you can see that these slotted holes here, we basically aligned it right in the center, both directions, front to back and up and down. And that's where we're going to start for our adjustment right now. So we can go ahead and put this bolt in the hole, and then we can snug down all of these. They don't have to be really tight yet, but snug them down enough so that these frame mounting brackets slide in and get nice and tight to the bumper here. Once those are snugged up enough, then you can go ahead and tighten all of these original bolts that hold the bracket onto the frame, and that would make sure that these get tight against the frame, and it'll hold them in position in case we need to loosen the carriage bolts later and make some adjustments to the bumper. Then the brackets won't actually move at all. So you can go ahead and get all of that stuff adjusted, and then we're going to put the bumper cover on to see how it fits and if we need to make any other adjustments. So we're getting ready to put the whole bumper cover and grill and everything back on the truck, just to make sure we have a nice even reveal and our Low Pro is adjusted how we want it. So we need to put this support bracket back in place real quick, just so that our front grill can clip in here, so we'll know exactly that it's sitting in the right spot. We want to go ahead and put this back on the truck here and tighten these bolts down. So we're going to grab the whole front end, put it back on the truck here. So as you're putting this back on, you want to make sure you watch out for this wiring harness, that it doesn't get pinched on the bumper. Just kind of hold that up out of the way. Then you also have to pull the fender flare out to get the bumper to fit in behind it. you can go ahead and clip the bumper in on the side and under the headlight here, and then make sure the center is pushed into that bracket and it's actually clipped in. That way we know that everything is sitting right where it needs to be, and then we can get our low pro adjusted and do any other final adjustments there. Just make sure everything is fully clipped in here. You might even want to put a couple of the screws in the top of the grill just so it's all aligned properly, and then we'll check our reveal and gaps here on the side. So you can see we have the whole front end all clipped back in place, and we're just basically what you're checking for is your gap along here. You don't want your plastic to be riding right on the top of the bumper, because that will rub through the powder coat and cause it to rust. So we're looking for an even gap here, an even gap across the top. It looks like this side could go up just a tiny bit to get us an even reveal on both sides here, but otherwise our adjustment ended up really good. So we're going to go ahead and pull this front end off, probably mark the bumper at a reference point so we can loosen the bolts and lift it up just a little bit to make it even on that side, and then we can proceed with the rest of the install. So we've done all the final adjustment on our bumper. We lifted this side up just a little bit. Now you can tighten all of your mounting hardware. These 1/2-inch grade 8 carriage bolts and these M12 bolts, we just tighten all of them to 90 foot-pounds. That's totally fine for all of that hardware. And then your bumper is all tightened down, ready to go. If you're putting a winch in, you can do that now. You can just set the winch right in the top of the bumper here and put your bolts up through the bottom and bolt in your winch and your fair lead as well. Also, we provided some slotted holes on the top of the bumper. You can actually mount a 20-inch single row light bar right on top of the bumper here, and it'll line up with the little grate in the bottom of the grill here, so the light bar can actually shine through right there if you don't have a light bar anywhere else on your grill. Obviously our bumper doesn't provide an opening for a light bar inside, so if you want to run a 20-inch single row light bar, you can bolt that on right now on top of the bumper. And that should finish up everything for all the accessories and everything that goes on the bumper and tightening all the hardware for that. All right, once you have everything installed in your bumper, lights, winch, fair lead, all that stuff is ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and put this lower grill support bracket back on. You can bolt that one right in here and get that one tightened down. And then if your truck came with the lower automatic air dam that folds down below the bumper, you're gonna have that big electric motor which needs to be relocated. So that gets relocated up here with the brackets and the relocation kit that we provide in the hardware kit. We're going to show you a clip from our other Tundra front bumper installation video that shows you how to modify that motor and relocate it up here in the grill. Next thing we'll need to do, if your truck is equipped with the active air dam, we'll have to remove this big electric motor here that's attached to the back of this aluminum crash bar. So you'll want to start with just unplugging the electrical connector here. Pull these two plastic tabs out so your harness is loose, and then we have two bolts here that use 10mm to get those out, and then there's two more right here coming in from the back side, also 10mm wrench for that. So you'll need to take those 4 bolts out, and then you can remove this entire motor and take it out from the front of the truck. So we have our active air dam motor on the workbench here. Took it out from the truck, and this needs to be remounted. We move it up higher, up behind the grill, because you cannot just unplug this unit and leave it, just take it off the truck, because you will get codes and issues with the sensors on the truck. So we need to remount this up there, and the only way to make this fit and use it is that we need to cut off this little arm down here, because this is the arm that normally deploys and holds the big air dam down closer to the ground. So that needs to get out of our way for us to remount this behind the grill. So the first thing we need to do to make that happen, we got to take this little plastic cover off here. So we just have one of these little clips here we need to pop up, and then this will just come right off. So we have access to pull this arm out. And then we just need a 14mm wrench. We're going to take this bolt out, and a 10mm for the other side here. And we can take this nut completely off and then pull the bolt out, and there will be a spring assembly and a couple of plastic kind of stoppers inside there that will come off, and then we can fold this arm out farther to get better access to cut it. Now you might want to just take note of which direction, like which side this bolt goes into this assembly here and how it all comes apart, but it pretty much just should just come right out. These pieces can only go in one way, essentially. They only line up one way. So you can take these little plastic gears out, pull these out of both sides. And then this spring is going to fall out of the center there. And now we can pull this arm out, and we're going to go ahead and cut this right along the bottom here, pretty much as far down as you can get close to this round assembly here, so that this will no longer fold down and get in our way. So we're just going to use a cutoff wheel to go ahead and cut through that. So we've pulled the little arm out of our air dam motor here, just clamped it to the table. I'm going to go ahead and cut it. I'm going to show you where here. We're going to go right along the edge of where this little square QR code is and slice all the way through this portion, because we need to keep this round part and put it back in the motor. So you could use a Sawzall or a multitude of things to cut through that, but of course a cutoff wheel kind of melts the plastic, can make a little bit of a mess. But whatever you have to cut through that, you can clean up these rough edges if you want to, really not necessary. But once this is cut off, now you can reassemble it back into your motor here. So we have our round piece that we cut off ready to put back into the motor here. So we just need to make sure we align it. There's these thicker plastic fins here, and these two notches, they need to go facing down towards the table here as we have it shown. So we're going to go ahead and put it back inside. You want to make sure that these little locking tabs are on this side of that stopper right there. So you can fold both of those up and then put this back down inside here. And then you'll want to put your spring in. It goes in the middle, and then these little white plastic gears go with this smaller portion towards the center, and this bigger ring goes to the outside, and it locks into the black piece that goes in next. So then you can grab your black outer piece, put the greasy side in so that it locks into this other white gear in here. Come on. Now you have to get that inner small ring to fit inside the spring in there so that that gear will go all the way in place. And then your outside cap again. And then our bolt goes in from this side all the way through. Washer and nut on the other side. And you'll just tighten that. Basically hand tight. It doesn't get super tight. It'll just kind of compress that spring, and then the threads will stop on there, and it'll be tight enough, and then you can put this plastic cover back on with your plastic clip. So we have our whole motor mounting kit here, the brackets on the table with all the hardware, everything that you need to remount this motor up behind the grill. Also going to need a 1/4-inch drill bit to drill one hole in the front of the inner structure on the truck, and to also open up one of the holes on this. So we're going to start with that first. It's just this one slotted hole right here on the motor. You just need to open it up. It barely takes anything at all. Just kind of run your 1/4-inch drill bit in and out of there a couple times to open that up, so it'll be ready for the 1/4-inch bolt that needs to go through it on the next step. So now we need to get ready to mount this lower bracket that's going to hold our motor in place. We're going to start with removing one of these OE bolts here on the front inner structure, and we're going to go ahead and take that one out. That's a 14mm socket there. Now we're going to align our bracket, put it back on using that factory bolt through this bottom lower corner right here. I'm going to put it through the bracket there and then thread the bolt back in. And you can go ahead and let that bracket just rest on the inner structure right here. You don't want it sliding down over that kind of on that corner there. Lift it up just enough so it's nice and flat. You can tighten your bolt here. Now we're going to go ahead and drill 1/4-inch hole through this opening right here. So now we're going to go ahead and put our 1/4 by 3/4 bolt with a washer on each side and a lock nut on the back right through that hole that we just drilled in the front inner structure of the truck. Now that our lower bracket is bolted in place, next we need to move this coolant hose right here. It needs to go behind this bracket so that it can fit behind our motor once we get it mounted up here. So you'll need a 10mm socket to remove a couple of the bolts that hold this bracket and this lower one on. We need, well, I guess we don't have to do that one, just this upper one here. And then there's a nut on this side we need to take off so that these hoses can move a little more freely. And then you can just push the hose up out of this plastic holder. Pull this bracket off of the stud where we just removed that small nut, and then we're going to kind of pull down on it, pull this forward, get the hose behind there. You also want to pull this wiring harness out from there, and then you can put go ahead and put your bolt back into this bracket, tighten that one down in place, and the hose can be clipped back into this holder on this side here. We're going to leave this loose for now because it kind of needs to stretch behind that motor, and that'll give us some room to be able to do that. So we're ready to go ahead and set our motor in place on top of that bracket. It's helpful to have someone hold this motor in place for you because you're going to need to hold these 3/4-inch spacers and the bolts and everything and get it all lined up all at the same time. So we're going to start by kind of pushing back on this hose here. The hose is going to go behind this motor. So we're going to set it down there on top of the bracket and just push it back into place. And then we'll get the rest of our hardware lined up. So over on this side, we're going to use a 1/4 by 3/4 bolt, flat washer, and then we have to put our spacer in behind this bracket between that and the motor. That'll go all the way through the spacer and the back side of the motor. And then you'll do another flat washer and your lock nut on the back there. Then on this left side, we need to do the same thing, but with a 5/16 by 1 3/4 bolt, flat washers and lock nut on that side as well. You can leave those bolts loose for now. We need to get our upper bracket aligned and in place next. Next, we're going to go ahead and align our upper mounting bracket for the motor. This can go either way, doesn't matter. It's reversible, I guess. So we just want to put it in so that our tabs are facing that way and the main part of it is that way. Makes it easier to reach in from the side and get your hardware in there. So we're going to go through the bottom here, and we want to line it up with this large hole on top here. So you'll probably have to kind of push down and back on the motor to get it in there. Line it up with that large hole there, and then we're going to put our 5/16 by 1 bolt with flat washer through the top, and then flat washer and lock nut on the bottom. Now we're going to use the same hardware to attach the motor to the bottom of the bracket down here. We'll have a 5/16 by 1 bolt with 2 flat washers and a lock nut as well. Now that you have everything in place, you want to adjust your motor so that it's nice and level, because there is some play in the holes. You want to get it nice and level so it stays in position right there, and then you can go ahead and tighten down all of your hardware. So a couple things we need to finish up with relocating this motor here. We need to bend this bracket just a little bit here. We're going to push it back to give these radiator hoses a little bit more relief so they're not pushing so hard on the back of the motor there. What I'm going to do for that is I just have a crescent wrench that I'm going to put onto the inner structure portion right here, just to kind of help support it so that we can get it to bend in the right place. So I put that on there, and then I just have an extension with a socket on it that I'm going to put over this stud to help it not slip off when I push on it. And I'm just going to force this bracket back a little ways like that to get a little bit more room there for the hose, and then you can put this hose back onto that metal bracket and attach your nut and tighten that one down. The final thing you need to do here is just kind of reroute your wiring, plug the motor back in. So what we're doing is this clip that used to be attached down here, we just bring the harness up, clip it into this other hole up above here, so it kind of helps hold the wires in place. You plug in your motor, and everything is good to go. So we've shown you guys how to relocate this lower valance motor if you have that on your Tundra. Now, what we showed you already in the video was for non-hybrid models. So we now have a hybrid in the shop here, and it's a little bit different. So this one has these extra cooling fans in front of the radiator, and it doesn't allow room to mount this motor over on the passenger side like we did on the non-hybrid motor or options. So we're going to show you real quick a few things we had to do a little bit differently, but you can use all the same mounting brackets and everything to mount the motor on this side. So the first thing, really, you're going to use the same bracket, the same lower bracket that we used on that side. It's just going to be flipped over to the other side. So you use the same bolt to mount it here, drill your 1/4 inch hole on the bottom, and that mounts exactly the same as it did on this side. It's just flopped over to the other side here. You'll still use your big aluminum spacers in the back and mount your motor to it. And then the same mount on the top here, that long skinny L-shaped piece that goes in the top. Now, in order to get this motor to fit here, first you'll need to remove this horn. You can just kind of unplug it and set it off to the side so that you have room to get this motor behind there. And then once the motor's in place, the horn can get bolted back on in the same position. The other thing you'll have to do is kind of reroute this wiring harness to be able to reach all the way up to this side and plug in that motor. So you'll have to put this harness behind the rubber hose and kind of move a couple things around. I'm not sure what this is, but it was mounted here. We had to move it over just so there's enough length for the wires to reach up to this connector here. So I just used an existing bolt and reattached this little electronic piece right through that bolt hole there. So really the only other thing to watch for is that this AC line, I had to move it just a little bit so that it's not rubbing on this steel bracket right here. I pulled it out just a little bit, so you want to be gentle with that. Just kind of slowly bend it so that it doesn't kink and get any holes in it. But you want to make sure that's not rubbing on that bracket, or it will cut through the AC line and it'll cause a leak. But other than that, everything is mounted the exact same. The motor just moves over to this side. It doesn't get flipped around or reversed or anything like that. Just put it on this side, but use all the same mounting brackets, and make sure all your clearances are good here. The other tight spot is just this wiring harness right here where it plugs in. The wires are pretty close, but I was able to push this motor all the way over to one side with the adjustment in our holes so that they're not rubbing against each other. So that is how you want to mount it if you do have a hybrid model, just because we have to avoid this big electric fan here. Otherwise, if it's not a hybrid, you can mount it over on this side here. All right, so we went ahead and put our whole front end back on the truck. Just lowered it into place there and aligned everything. We can go ahead and clip down the bumper for the final time and actually clip it into the fender, the headlight, and then we can push the flares back into place too. So really you just get it up into position there, snap it into place on the headlight and on the fender and the headlight, I mean. This one is this clip I think is a little worn out, so it's not sticking anymore, but it should clip right under the headlight like that. And then around the fender here, you just want to make sure that this part gets brought all the way around and hooks onto that little stud there, and then you can pop the flare back into place too. We can go ahead and do that on both sides, and then you can also reinstall all the small screws across the top of the grill. Plug in your wiring harnesses up top here, and then we'll move back down to the bottom. There's a couple of little support brackets we need to install onto the low pro bumper. All right, we're back underneath the truck here, and we need to get our factory plastic bumper connected to the low pro bumper so it's supported really well. So we have these pair of brackets that come with the bumper. So we're gonna put this longer leg here with the big slotted hole going the same direction as the leg. That's gonna go on top of this plastic. So we're gonna kind of set it on top there. And then this part of the bracket goes on the outside of the bumper and lines up with this slotted hole that's in the side of the bumper. Then we're gonna take the 5/16 by 3/4 carriage bolt, put it through from the inside of the bumper. Now we have a 5/16 flat washer, put on the outside, and then 5/16 flange nut. So we're just going to finger tighten that for now, and then we'll grab our hardware to attach the bracket to the bumper here. Now we're going to take a 5/16 by 3/4 carriage bolt, put it in through the top of this L bracket up here, and down through our plastic bumper. Then 5/16 flat washer and flange nut to go on that one. Now you want to install those brackets on both sides, and then you can use that bracket. There's a little bit of slotted adjustment to where you can kind of move this plastic and adjust it a little bit if you need to, so you have like an even reveal along the edge of your bumper here. And you can go ahead and tighten down that hardware once it's in place where you want it. Now we're going to lower the truck down and put in the remaining screws that hold the flare and the rest of the fender liner in the wheel well. Once you get the rest of your screws installed for your fender liner and your fender flare, that finalizes the reassembly process. One final thing you want to do is double check that wiring harness that was behind the grill. Make sure it's not pinched anywhere, and then it's secured up and out of the way. It's important to go and double check that. One final thing, just to check all of your hardware, make sure everything's been tightened down and that you didn't miss anything. And that concludes the install of your low pro front winch bumper.